Hello, and today we're going to be reviewing the Ryobi P317 compression drive 3/8 crown stapler. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, first up, starting at the rear of the tool, on the bottom we have the battery slot, which will accept any of Ryobi's lithium 18-volt batteries, and is, well, fairly well designed. There is only a little bit of looseness or play to speak of, and the batteries lock into place nice and securely. And when it comes to battery life, this is a fairly effective tool, allowing you to staple thousands of times before having to change the battery out, if you are using a 4 amp-hour battery. The one thing I would change when it comes to the battery slot on this particular tool, however, would be the overall placement. I would definitely have the slot a little bit more forward, just because, well, the balance of the tool as it is right now means it's a little bit tippy when you rest it on top of the battery pack like you would typically do with a drill or impact driver. But other than that, everything here works as intended and gets a pass from me. Moving on. Okay, next up we have the grip. Now the grip on this particular tool is a pistol style grip similar to what you'll find on an impact driver or drill, and is going to be pretty much the same kind of design philosophy. It's going to be a plastic body covered with a rubberized coating, which is going to allow you to have excellent control over the tool if you are wearing gloves or are barehanded or have sweaty hands. So really no complaints here, and everything works as intended. There's also additional rubberized coating on the sides of the tool to help prevent marring on surfaces, as well as on the front slide where the staples are stored, because I'm not really actually sure why. Go figure. But other than that, everything is pretty well designed. The tool itself is fairly well balanced when you're holding it if you pair it with a 3 amp-hour battery, but any bigger and it becomes unbalanced, any smaller, it will also become unbalanced or front heavy. So it really is going to be best paired with, say, a 3 amp-hour battery or possibly a 4 amp-hour battery. So yeah, really no complaints there either. And like I said earlier in the video, I wish the battery slot was a little bit further forward so that when you set the tool down on a flat surface that it would stay standing a little bit easier, but it's still, well, adequate. So yeah, everything here also gets flying colors, and I don't really have any major complaints. So yeah, moving on. Okay, next up we have the trigger. Now the trigger on this particular tool is located where it is typically found on a drill or impact driver or real firearm, and it is going to be, well, made out of plastic, and it will be sized to a single finger in size. Now the trigger itself is made out of black plastic with small indentations that have been molded into it, but unfortunately there is no, well, rubberized coating, so there is a little bit of a disappointment there. And when it comes to the overall operation of the trigger, you pull it once to fire a single staple. There is no rapid fire option, unfortunately, so you'll have to pull the trigger each and every time. In order for you to release the safety, you will have to push the front of the stapler against an object which you are intending to staple, and by doing this you will depress a small black plate on the front of the tool, which will in turn, well, release the safety. It's a fairly simple and standard design, and everything here works as intended. So as far as I'm concerned, everything here gets a pass, and while it would have been nice to have a rapid fire option, it's still a completely usable tool, and you can still fire staples fairly quickly depending on how fast you can pull the trigger. So yeah, moving on. Okay, next up we have the control knob for the drive force as well as the indicator. Now, unfortunately on this particular tool, I'll say this right off the bat, it seems to do absolutely nothing. I've tested this particular mechanism on 2 different staplers of the exact same model, and there's been absolutely no difference in the results. The stapler always seems to fire at the exact same speed or power, and unfortunately, if you are looking for a tool where you can have some control over the driving force, this is not going to be the tool for you. It is still a very useful tool, and it will definitely still accomplish the job, and I do think they put some time and effort into designing the knob and indicator, since they both work very well for, well, letting you know which direction you should be turning the knob, and the indicator letting you know where you currently have it set at. But unfortunately, if it does absolutely nothing in the overall operation of the tool, it's definitely just a worthless feature. So yeah, this is definitely an area of the tool that needs improvement and to be, well, reworked. Moving on. Okay, next up we have the attachment for installing wire or screen. This is an optional feature, but it can come in handy in different situations. This particular metal piece is a simple clip-on piece that is located at the top of the slide. There are 2 sides to it. One side with 3 spikes will be used for installing screen, and then the other side with 2 wider spikes will be used for installing wire. This is definitely a useful tool and feature for a lot of different situations. However, since the drive force control is not currently functional on either one of my staplers, and I think it's actually a defective problem that runs more than just my two particular staplers, I think that this is going to be an area of the tool that should be used with caution. I would definitely not use this particular stapler for installing high current or high voltage wires, simply because since you don't have any control over the amount of force it's using to deliver the staplers, it will probably end up cutting into the protective coating going over a wire, causing arcing or a voltage leak, causing you to get either electrocuted or potentially a fire to start. So this is definitely something that you need to use caution with if you are planning on using it, and make sure you inspect the coating after you have used the stapler to, well, inject a staple. So yeah, just something to be aware of, but it still is a useful and nifty feature which can come in handy and help you guide and place your staples where you need them to be. So yeah, definitely useful, but something that you need to be careful with. Moving on. Okay, next up we have the slide, or the staple holster, or the staple mag, whatever you want to call it. I personally am just going to be calling it a slide. Now, the overall construction of the slide in this particular tool is going to be metal internals for the part where the staples are stored, followed by the plastic housing and a rubberized coating over that plastic housing. The slide itself works nice and smoothly. The release is located at the bottom and will easily slide open with a spring assist, allowing you to easily load more staples into the tool when you run out, and it slides incredibly easy. Have I mentioned that before? It is so nice to have a tool that doesn't jam up or get stuck somewhere along the travel of the slide. So quite frankly, I'm very pleased with the design here. I haven't had any issues with the double feeding staples, and speaking of staples, it can use staples in between 1/4 of an inch all the way up to 9/16 of an inch, and that is a fairly good variety. Now granted, these are light duty upholstery style staples, but honestly, you can use these staples for a lot of different purposes and they hold up just fine. So as far as I'm concerned, the slide gets an A+, and I don't have any major shortcomings or negatives when talking about the slide on this particular tool. So that's a good showing. Moving on to the weight of the tool. Okay, without a battery, the tool weighs 1,358 grams, which is just shy of 3 pounds. And with a 4 amp hour battery, it weighs 2,067 grams, which is about 4.5 pounds. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about this particular tool in use. I have to say I'm pretty happy with its overall performance. Yes, there is the major downside that the actual compression or the depth guide doesn't actually work as intended, and it pretty much always fires the staple at full speed without any sort of, well, change when it comes to the overall drive force. But other than that, it really doesn't have any other major shortcomings. There's a few minor things I would change, such as adding a rapid fire option and maybe making the price a little bit lower. But for the most part, it's a very reliable stapler. It almost always seems to fully drive the staple in flat and smoothly, and you can use it with harder plastics or even, thicker fabrics, as long as your staple is long enough. For me personally, I do enjoy having a tool like this in my arsenal in case of, well, in situations that would require for a faster repair process for a temporary basis, such as, well, recovering after a large damaging storm that produces tornadoes, hurricanes, or hail, if you get the point of what I'm saying. It definitely is a useful tool to have in your arsenal, and whether or not if you're using it for repair, hanging landscape material, or hanging signs or material on walls, it can definitely be a useful tool. So for me personally, this is definitely a fun tool to have on hand, and I would highly recommend it if you are in the need of an electric stapler and you don't care about, well, the drive force. If you are looking for something that is a little bit more delicate and has a little bit more finer control over the amount of force that the tool is using, you're probably going to want to look elsewhere. But with that being said, let's go ahead and recap with the pros and cons. 18 volt. 18 volt means that this will work with all your Ryobi 18 volt batteries as well as other brands' batteries, as long as you're using a third-party adapter. Just remember, you do that at your own risk. Weight. Overall, this is a fairly lightweight tool, especially if you're pairing it with a smaller battery. So at the end of the day, I would consider this to be a pro. Grip. The grip on this particular tool is very comfortable and easy to work with. It's angled at the appropriate angle, unlike other tools, and, well, quite frankly, I have zero complaints about its overall design and functionality. So in my opinion, this is a pro. Battery life. Now, Ryobi claims this can drive up to 5,500 staples with a single 4 amp hour battery. I, needless to say, did not actually test that theory, but in my opinion, it does have a very good battery life, and so in my opinion, that is a pro. I didn't really talk about this earlier, but you can use this with an optional wire belt clip, so that is another pro in my opinion. Screen wire attachment. This is a very useful feature. It'd be far more useful if all the other features on this particular tool worked as intended, but it can still come in handy for a variety of situations. So it's a pro in my opinion. And the first con is the price. Now, this particular stapler retails for about $80 US, and if all the included features, well, worked as intended, that would be a justifiable price. But unfortunately, the real world isn't as kind, and not all the features, well, work. So as far as I'm concerned, $80 is too expensive for this particular stapler. No rapid fire. Unfortunately, this is another con. The fact that it doesn't have rapid fire means that it's going to take you longer to complete your jobs, and it also leads to more wear and tear on the trigger. So, in my opinion, this is going to be a, well, con. Drive force selector. Unfortunately, the selector doesn't seem to work on either one of my staplers, so I would definitely consider this to be a con, especially if you're trying to use this to install more delicate objects such as electrical wiring or things that can be easily damaged. So as far as I'm concerned, this is definitely a con. And that is it for the pros and cons. Final thoughts on this particular stapler. This is definitely a useful tool to have in your arsenal of tools, and depending on where you live, they could be a necessity. However, there are definitely aspects of this particular tool that could be improved upon, or just, well, repaired completely so that they work properly. But as long as you are aware of its shortcomings and you think that it could still be a useful tool for you and your own personal needs, this particular stapler comes recommended. And that is it for this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. God bless.